Welcome to the X podcast.
Whoa, wait a minute.
You know what?
Where is this coming from?
Welcome.
This means nothing to anybody listening.
Wait, is this the LeBron James way of doing podcasts now?
Yeah, who's that?
Only the
is-
GOAT. Only the greatest of all time.
Oh, whoa,
Really?
You mispronounced Michael.
Yeah.
But welcome to the X podcast. I have Tim, the Toolman Taylor.
Toolman Taylor.
You do realize that there is 10% of the audience that actually knows what
That's
you just
true.
referenced.
And I have Sound Mind Sam right here in the middle.
I have a question.
Yes.
And then we'll move on.
Okay.
Because we'll be quick. Do you always come up with such eccentric and crazy openings
You've
when
always
it's
asked me
just the two of you on the podcast?
Oh, none.
Wait, really?
So
Yeah.
it's only
like it's like every other time.
only
Maybe.
whenever there's a guest on the podcast.
Or some guests.
Probably,
Certain
actually,
guests.
it's probably mainly just you.
It's probably just you.
It's probably mainly
Okay,
just
I'm
certain
glad
guests.
you. Okay, said that.
Yes, you provoked
He
silliness.
would no.
I
He would do
provoke
that.
your
He would do
silliness.
that. Honestly, he would do that with probably a lot of the other guests that would be
yeah,
from,
exactly.
from our staff that would be on here.
I agree.
Well, okay.
I agree.
I walk in this morning. My first moment in the office, I see Pastor Zach walking in. I mean, you would have thought he had just come in from a UN meeting. I mean, seriously on his face. Anybody seen my castle? I said, I'm so sorry. He goes, my castle. Anybody seen it? Walks out. I mean, like he was literally walking into an attorney's office. Walks back in. He goes, my castle's missing. I said, I'm so sorry. What's happening? He
Someone
goes,
stole your
He goes,
castle?
someone. I said, are you talking about your Legos? And he goes, yes. I said, did someone take him? And he looked at me seriously and then kind of grinned. He goes, yes, someone took him. I said, I laughed. Oh, it took me a good 10 minutes to recover.
Okay.
I said, what happened? He goes, the castles and Gandalf are missing. And then you found them in Janice's supplies.
What? Someone stole them and put them in Janice's supplies to frame her?
I would assume so.
Wow. This is what it looks like to be in ministry, by the way. In case you were wondering.
Okay. First of all,
Yeah.
you understand that what's our phrase for him? That if
Whoa.
if he opens his mouth.
Oh, yeah. If he opens his mouth, he's probably lying.
Is
Okay,
anything-
so-
It's actually the phrase is, if his lips are moving, you know he's lying.
Okay.
Okay,
So
is anything I said not true?
there was a
Okay.
lot of exaggeration
Okay.
with this
In
environment.
what way?
I did say to you, someone stole my castle.
you were declaring it to the
If
room.
someone just said that when I walked into the room, I would say, excuse me, what? Someone stole my castle. I'd be like, what are you talking about? And I didn't know you had a castle.
It's my Lego castle.
Okay.
It's all good. We love Legos. Okay, we like to have fun. Okay,
We-
in
we
the room.
quickly brought in weed. didn't
Yeah, I
we?
did.
Yeah.
I
We
don't
love
really have any
castles.
Legos, but
we
I have
as-
nothing against it.
I will say.
They're expensive, and I
I
don't know
will
why
say
you'd spend your
I
it
just
money.
have
is-
nothing for it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not true because you did send me a Lego set the other day, and you were like,
What'd I do?
"Okay, you sent me a Lego set on."
Well, I thought you would like it.
No, it was through DMs. You were like, "Okay, I can get into Legos."
No, I did not say that.
Yes.
Why don't we
you
pull
did.
it up?
Okay, I apologize, dear
I did not
listeners.
say I can get into them. I said,
We-
this is pretty cool. Was it?
We were
It was
limited
shoes.
on
Oh,
time.
was it cars?
Oh, they were shoes.
Okay, we're limited on time. We need to take a few moments to connect. Okay.
Whoa.
Mm.
I see what you did there.
In fact,
I see what you did there.
we've been having a whole sermon series. Speaking of connect, on the art of connection,
Mm.
What a nice segue.
and thank you. Pastor Zach here brought up a few thoughts that's been kind of ruminating inside of him along those lines. And so,
Well, I would love to know how many people you've connected with over the last week.
I mean, are we talking like on a deep level or
Yes,
like?
on a deep soul level.
Yeah, I mean, I had a number of deep connections Sunday morning with people at church in the foyer, and then some dear friends threw me a surprise party Sunday night, so I got to connect with them.
Yeah.
Mm.
Was in Nashville for a really meaningful conference with some dear friends and some old friends that I hadn't seen in years in Nashville. So a lot of deep connections. But
Wow.
you had some deep questions based on the series.
I do, actually.
Yes.
I'm going to go somewhere
Okay.
with this. So, Pastor Tim, how many deep connections?
You are so ridiculous. He's just trying to put you on the spot.
Oh, I know,
This
I
is
know.
pretty
I know.
funny.
But I was going to
Why do I
About
take
your, about
that?
your
I
deep
was-
questions.
but I was going to go with it and see if I could get us somewhere.
Sure.
So, how many deep connections have you had?
Probably 17.
So you had 18 and he had 17.
Yes.
Well, I don't want to one up him. That'd be rude.
It would be rude.
Really
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Probably at least. Well, that was 17 on Sunday morning.
Oh wow.
I didn't. Yeah, I wasn't including Sunday night and all the other days.
Wow.
all the other days and
Yeah.
things like that.
I had a bunch of them this morning.
So
Just really connected on a deep level.
it seems like both of you
Yeah.
are successful at making deep connections with people. So my question is,
Uh-oh.
why is it so hard in our culture for people to make deep connections with each other?
Can we define deep? Because I'm not sure if all mine qualified. That we just said.
You just said they were deep connections.
You didn't specify what deep meant.
Okay, maybe
We
I was
didn't talk about
being
the weather.
a little tongue in cheek,
Okay.
but the question is still a good one, I think.
Yeah.
Why
That
do
is a
we
good question.
why do we struggle in our culture to make deep connections with each other?
Okay. Well, I've already preached a few of the messages, but some of the things that I brought out, and then you guys feel free, whatever. I think we have to recognize just the digital era that we're in has altered how we connect with each other. I mean, you go back 30 years ago, and the way we connected with people was getting together.
Okay.
It was maybe over the phone, but it was getting together. And then as the internet came along and social media platforms came along, it just made it easier to not be together and to text messaging, DM, all this stuff. It just kind of changed. I guess it just changed the way. And so I don't know if we as humanity were prepared for how it would alter or affect our relationships. And I think a lot of the studies that we're seeing today that are coming out is that we're now starting to have enough data to go, oh, this has had some adverse effects. Not that technology doesn't have lots of benefits, but we are seeing some adverse effects of it when it comes to relationally. I think you can look at, from a modern era, you can look at the mobility factor. We're more mobile than we've ever been, which means people begin to move further and further away from each other. Like, whereas communities were all tight-knit, close together, we relied upon each other, you needed it for survival. We're now more mobile than ever, and that has kind of like separated or created distance that technology has helped fill. And so, I mean, look at just the state of what it's like. You have a house and you got a garage door, and you drive in, open the garage door when you get home, close the garage door when you get home, open it, get in, close it, and you may not even talk to your neighbors. So I just think the world has changed a little bit, and I think, we are feeling the negative effects of it. So I think those are just some of the reasons why. I think we're more polarized than ever.
Yeah.
I think at least here in America, I think all of the things that have happened, especially over the last 5 years, but I mean, this has been going on. You look at what we've referenced a bunch, coddling American mind, and there's just been this kind of like, there's been this, I want to say, since the 90s, there's been this, I don't want to say fear, but we saw what shifted in the 90s and with crime, with, I think one of the ones that was made reference, remind me from Coddling American Mind, was it Jean-Benet Ramsey or one of those, like, that became like national, just huge news.
Colorado abduction, as it was 93 is when it happened.
And then everybody started, so it changed the way we parent. And so now we don't let kids play outside. And we don't let them in there. I mean, there's people that will say they won't let their, I think it was in his Jonathan Haidt's latest book, there's parents that won't let their kids play in their own yard until they're like 12 or 13 years old. And so I think there's just a variety of factors that have led us to the point where I think we are lonelier than we've ever been before. And I don't see us, I just think it's impeded our ability to relate to people and one-on-one.
I'm curious, and I want to get your thoughts on the same question, but I'm curious. A lot of times I've heard that criticism before, or factor.
I don't know if it's criticism, it's just reality, right?
Digital is the reason. A lot of times people say that affects, let's say, millennial and younger generations more. How do you think that's affected maybe your generation and older when it comes to digital connections? Like, do you think it's easier for older generations to connect because they didn't have some of these factors, and they're maybe late adopters to this technology?
Well, I don't know if it's made it any easier. I will say this, that I think that growing up in the time when I did, it forced you to develop social awareness, social skills that what we're seeing now in the very youngest generation, I wouldn't say yours, but the youngest generation of at certain ages of not having certain social skills. I wonder at times, and I can't pinpoint any particular thing, but when I look at the youngest, when I say 20-year-olds today,
Mm-hmm.
and I think back to just when I was 20 growing up, and again, this is going to be a massive stereotype, and I understand this can't be applied broadly across the board,
yeah.
but it seems like the level of maturity has dropped significantly. I mean, again, I know I'm probably a little bit of an abnormal case getting married at 20. We had a house at 21 or 22 years old, kids, all this stuff. But it just seems like the youngest generation, and for a variety of factors, and I'm not blaming them. I think a variety of factors, it just seems that we're way later at getting started, launching later, all these things. And again, I don't know, maybe it existed back then. We didn't see it. We didn't measure it, but it just seems like there is some differences.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between
Mm-hmm.
when I grew up. And I think social skills, I'm not saying it's like, oh, we're better around
Yeah.
people in this, but
Yeah,
I just remember my daughters. I remember at one point asking my daughters, like, hey, we didn't order a pizza. Why don't you go? I can't call, order a pizza. I'm like, no, it's not hard. Just dial the number and then just say, when they get on, what am I supposed to say? Well, when they get on the phone, just say, I'd like a large pepperoni pizza. You know what I mean? Is that going to be picked up? Oh, we'll pick it up. Okay, what's the name? I said, just answer the questions.
Yeah.
But it was just like, I can't call them. Can I do it on the phone? Can I
Yeah.
can I do it online and just order it so I don't have to talk to somebody? So I do see some of that
Yeah. Yeah. makes
today
sense.
that I think has affected.
Yeah.
Maybe some social skills are a little bit delayed. Now I see them growing into it and they've had to do it,
Yeah.
and so it happens eventually, I think.
I'm curious for you, same question. Like, why do you think people struggle to have deep connections, meaningful connections today?
I think there's so much to it. I mean, you've already preached two phenomenal messages going into the heart of connection. We've talked ad nauseum at this table through calling the American mind and loneliness and disconnection and all the things y'all are talking about. For some reason, when you just asked him, the three simple things that popped to my mind is there are big reasons, small reasons, and practical reasons. I think the big ones are the universal, timeless ones of shame. He talked about that you can't have connection without vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lack of being willing to be authentic and vulnerable is the number one biggie. It's like a soul thing when you can't choose to be fully honest and fully transparent. Fear, shame, distrust, all those things. So I think you got the big soul things, and I think you got what I would call the little things. They're not little, but it's what I'd call the little things. The EQ, the people skills,
Mm-hmm.
Social
skills,
the social,
maturity.
whether it's societal, generational, like you're talking about, like not used to actually present engagement, or whether it's just bad habits handed down from families, or whether it's just personality, whatever it may be, just the inability to choose to be able to look people in the eye, show interest, listen, be a conversationalist. Choose to invest in it, choose to prioritize it. It's so I think you have the big things, you have the little things, and you have the practical things. And that's where I think the digital age comes in. And it is interesting because I heard somebody saying, the question you're asking him, while there are challenges unique to digital natives, not having maybe to grow as much of the social muscle, all those kind of things, I have seen a lot of stats recently that talk about from an addiction standpoint that there's no differentiation of persons when it comes to digital natives or middle-aged parents who are just as addicted to looking at their screen, just as addicted to Facebook, just as addicted to. And I know I mentioned it to both of y'all, but one book I've been really looking forward to coming out is Reconnected by Carlos Whitaker, who's just a serial entrepreneur. He's been a pastor, a speaker, an author, a podcaster. He's got an Insta familiar. Right now, his biggest source of income and career is his Instagram following. But I think it was about a year ago, he saw this stat as he was scrolling that showed the average person is going to lose 10 years off their life on their screens. And he said it was just one of those epiphany moments where he's like, if somebody were to come to me today and say, hey, would you trade away 10 years of your life? I'd be like, oh my God, heck no. And he said, and it just hit me. And he's like, and I have all the excuses. Well, part of my life is on here. Part of my career is on here. There's all those things. And he's like, but I just was like, for him personally, it was a wake-up call. So he did what a lot of people wouldn't have the luxury of doing. He planned for a year and then decided to go 7 weeks screen-free. Spent 4 weeks at a monastery, 3 weeks with Amish. Called his family on occasion from a payphone. Took a camera. It's funny because he kind of did a documentary. And people were like, how'd you do that without a phone? He's like, do people forget there are cameras?
Yeah.
He literally took a camera. And he talked about literally the first 3 days were withdrawal.
I bet.
Like woke up in cold sweats. So much to the point where he's like, no, there's got to be something deeper going on in me. In which he's like worked later and said it was probably a control thing. But the fascinating thing was he's talking about, I haven't read the book yet, but I listened to him on a podcast, but Dr. Iman that we've talked about here with Dr. West, famous, neuroscientist, like his wife had the idea, why don't you have Dr. Iman take scans before and after? So he took scans of his brain. And like Dr. Iman looked at his brain and was like, did you used to play soccer? There are like lumps that are very like typical pattern. And he's like, yes. And like he's like, your brain's lumpy. Basically talking about all these things going on in his brain. And then he had scans taken directly when he got back. And he's like, look, there could have been a lot of correlating factors, but basically like the lump smoothed out. His cognitive memory function between 0 and 100, because he had a lot of dementia worries, was like right at 50 when he first took the brain scans before the 7 weeks, which he was like, okay, that's kind of a relief. It's not bad. It's not good. It's 50. At the end of the 7 weeks off screens, it was at 99. It was at 99%. There are all these things that happened, but he was just like, what happened in his soul coming off of it? But talking about being present, like, Carrie Newhoff asked, is like, when you were with the Amish, like, did you feel a difference in relationships? He's like, oh my gosh. And he actually talked about how sad it was because like even the monks and the Amish like had phones. He's like, I didn't have a screen. He said, there's sometimes like we'd be in the middle of conversation and they'd like pull out their phone. He's like, am I really seeing a monk right now pull out their phone? Am I really seeing an Amish person? But he just talked about, he's like, when you literally don't have the feeling of a buzz, you don't have like anything. He said the level. He talked about how he just spent 3 weeks with the Amish, but they all wept. And he sobbed uncontrollably because in 3 weeks, the depth of connection that he had with them, just by being fully present, like surpassed anything he'd experienced. And
so maybe when you ask the question about
Yep.
deep connection, maybe none of us even know.
Maybe not. But there is something I do want to drill down on, specifically because, and you mentioned it in passing, but I think I just want to say, first of all, that book sounds incredible. It's called Reconnected by Carlos Whitaker.
Yeah, I think it says dis, and then it has like a
line to it.
brilliant marketing. It has a line through it and it's reconnected.
So maybe we can all read that and then come back and process that another time. But you mentioned something about authenticity, and I want to linger there for a moment because I think if I were to answer the same question, myself and both of you are so brilliant in the way you put things and the way your sermons were so awesome, and I think vulnerability is huge, and I think the way you unpacked EQ and what that's like last week on Sunday was so good. But I think being authentic is something that, as I look across the landscape of our culture right now, is a struggle for a lot of people. And I think, and I have a couple of thoughts and reasons as to why, and maybe we can get into that, but I'm curious y'all's thoughts, because I feel like social media has made everybody want to be this kind of unique standout. I want to be a standout in this way, or I want to curate a certain look, or I want to do all this. And I think that everyone thinks that they're creating their own individual brand or their own individual look or vibe or feel, whatever word you want to throw into it. But then as I look across people's profiles or what people present, I'm like, I see a lot of the same thing. It just looks a little different. And then when you get in conversations with people, you hear a lot of the same struggles or things that people are going through. I'm not minimizing any one person's struggles or what they're going through, but I think sometimes we struggle to be in touch with yourself. And I say that tongue in cheek. We were joking about the Legos and stuff aside at the beginning of this, but here's the connection. I'm someone who I feel like has always kind of bucked the trends. I'm someone who, and we joke about it laughingly at times, but I enjoy things that would be inconsistent with I don't want to say nerdy people, but like just I enjoy certain fantasy tropes, or I enjoy certain, but I'm also like very much into sports, and I am a sports guy, and those are things that are classically kind of in opposition to one another. But I'm comfortable,
Nerd and jock.
yeah, I'm comfortable living within that tension of who I am, and I just as I look around culture, I see a lot of people who are uncomfortable with maybe being their authentic selves. I'm curious. Why do you guys think that is? Where does that come from? Has it always been that way?
Well, I don't know.
What is authenticity even?
Well, first of all, I don't think that is a now problem.
No.
Just to say,
it's a human intrinsic problem.
I think we're talking about it, which is good, thinking about it, but I don't think it's a now problem. I think this has existed forever.
Yeah.
The idea of us never really. I think going back to, I want to go back to like the very first week of this series. I do think something really significant happened with that very first fall. That shame was introduced, and they covered themselves with leaves. And that was like the real first time where you were no longer authentic and with just even another person, let alone with God. And so I do think at the core of it, if you ask me, I would say I think shame is really at the root of it. And I think shame at our failure and shame at our I just think that those things, even though we may feel forgiven or this, I think that they probably still leave echo traces within our soul that it's really hard to kind of bear, be yourself. I think too, when you think of living in communities, I mean, I'm just going through a variety of different things that just hit my mind. I think there's an internal thing, which is the shame and guilt and just from mistakes and failures that just kind of leaves you not wanting to be vulnerable because you get the world of emotions that comes with it, embarrassment and shame and all those things. I think, too, that when you think about living within communities, I think that there's also external forces and pressures that's been put on. I think about even just, all of us, and I don't think what era you grow up in. Going to school. That's this massive social experiment.
It is.
Where you try to find, you're surviving. It's interesting because I think of all creatures on this earth, it feels like, and I can't say that it doesn't, I'm sure it happens in some animal families, species and things like that. It just seems like we're the ones that will have no problem making fun of each other for really just dumb things. You know what I mean? Like, I just think about the real simplistic pains that you feel in school where somebody first made fun of your lunch or your lunch box or the shoes you were wearing or you know what I mean? We've all grown up and all had to deal with certain things like that. And I think that stuff just all affects us to a point where we learn based on experience. We learn based on that I'm not going to let myself be hurt. I just think it's a human survival type of thing. I think there's an element of us that we just kind of revert to this. I will show you what I'm going to show you. And that has nothing to do with social media. I think what we see in social media now is a reflection of what's actually been in our soul for a long time. It's just never been exposed.
Yes.
And so now where we have the filtering and the posting of what I want to show you and because that's what everybody wants you to believe. I'm just the whatever it could be. I'm this type of influencer, or I'm this kind of dad, and I fix everything around my house, or I'm this kind of mom, and we only do natural foods here and this and that. All those different things that we do. I think that what we're finding is what's in the soul is actually coming out on screens, and we've actually given voice to what's in our soul. And so I don't know. I really do think. I think digital is such a, like you kind of illustrate. I think it's such a small thing. I think it's probably delayed some of our social skills. I think it is affecting us to an extent when it comes to connecting with people. But I just think this is a way deeper and more intrinsic issue.
I agree.
I think it's beautifully said. I think when I mentioned the practical things, the small things, and the big things, the soul things, I think you just beautifully illustrated the big, the deep, the things that come from the fall. I think shame is really is the kicker for all of us. Shame in the small thing and big things.
Mm-hmm.
The shame over like the little things
Yep.
of your appearance, who you are,
Mm-hmm.
all the way to shame over as you get older, what I've done.
Mm-hmm.
So I can never fully let. I think what you said is it. I think it can be compounded in certain cultures by certain cultural things.
Yeah.
I know I'm biased, but one of the things and we're not perfect at it, one of the things I love that I feel like we've tried to curate here, the word, is an honest space
Mm-hmm.
and a down-to-earth space.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of places where personas win the day.
Yeah.
There's a lot of religious environments where personas win the day.
Yeah.
Where, I would venture to say the three of us would all agree that the way we speak on platform is the same as the way we'd speak in a conversation in the foyer.
Yeah.
There are a lot of historical religious spaces where that's not the case.
Right.
The moment you step on a platform, you're breathy and you got a different. And you could take that to school, to sports, to everything. And I think for a lot of people, maybe it's even coming out of a home situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think the danger for a lot of people is if you have a persona long enough, then one day somebody starts talking to you about authenticity, and it's hard to differentiate. Where does my persona end and my person begin?
Mm-hmm.
Like, who am I?
Yeah.
Aside from this projection I've had to learn to put on
Mm.
for success.
Spitball, give me like 2 ways someone can maybe recognize where their persona ends and where their real authentic person begins.
Get out of the bubble where your persona has won around people that you know will call you out for it.
Mm.
I had lunch with a guy, just heart of gold, and he wanted, for lack of better words, some mentoring, talking. And I just told him, because I'd built this kind of rapport with him, I said, you need to get around some really normal people because you've forgotten how to be normal. You give me a very spiritual answer for everything, and you've learned something, and I actually think you're an incredible person, but you've forgotten how to human.
Yeah.
And you need to get around some just normal people, and give them permission to call you out when you're being weird.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he came back a couple months later and said, I've done it, and thank you. This has helped me.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing that comes to my mind. I think some of us, we just need to get around some normal people.
That's good.
Where do you find them? Right.
You get out in life. And,
Yeah.
I mean, it's so funny. We're talking about connecting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I worked at a restaurant, I mean, and if you've been in the restaurant industry, you know that can be some of the most godless, like, tough industry. But I loved my time in the restaurant industry. But I was a server at this restaurant in Lexington, and I was about to drive or fly to Atlanta to interview for a youth pastor job back in like 2013. And one of my friends there, Rachel, not a person of faith, but we connected, and she was like, what are you going out there to do? It's like a church thing? And I was like, yeah, like, what are they looking for? And I was like, I think one of the things they're going to look for is just to see how I connect with students. She goes, what does that mean, connect with students? What does that mean? It just made me realize maybe even the word connect could be churchier than I realized. Like, but I just think it does us good when we're around those kind of people to be like, wait, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
I think one of the things about connecting with people, I think going back to maybe what your question, not the last one, but this one, I always remember this quote, and I think one of the things that we are seeing today, at least I think more so in our environment, that I will say, I do think generationally, this is, I think, a good trend that I think was when I historically has not been there, is I do think there is more and more of a shift toward vulnerability than what existed before. I do think we all deal with shame every generation. It doesn't matter what you have, but I do think that we are seeing, and I think it takes brave people to shift a culture. And I think when you see people who are like, I'm okay, like you said, with I'm okay with being vulnerable about who I am, what I'm walking through, what I'm going through. And what I have found, and I know this to be true, and like you said, we try to be the same people on the platform as we are off the platform. And so that means we're share our vulnerability, share this. But I always love the quote that Craig Rochelle always said, and I just think it's so true. And you were talking about connection, right? He said, we impress people with our strengths, but we connect with people through our weaknesses. And I think there are some basic human traits and weaknesses that every person feels. And I think when we're vulnerable enough to expose our struggle, I think that is one of the deepest connections you can make with another human. Whether it's, I've struggled with this behavior, or I've struggled with this sin, or I've struggled with this addiction, or I've struggled with this. That's why I think I was talking to a guy I think it was last week in our church, in our community, and he came up, they've been coming for a while, and the first time they'd introduced themselves. And the guy said, he's like, he said, I'm an addict. He's been sober, I think, for quite a while, but yeah. And we were just talking about community. He was like, we just decided a while ago, man, I wish I had his name. He said, we just decided a while ago, is like, we've been coming, but we're not connected here. And that we really need to do that. So we joined the circle, we joined this, we joined that. It was like, it was a really cool conversation. And the guy said, we were talking about the power of connection. And he's like, I remember back when COVID happened and people couldn't meet together. And he said, like, we go to AA all the time. And when we could not meet, he said, several people that I know of in there all fell back off the wagon. And there is something that's really powerful about, and I think probably that some of those are those kind of moments that people have. And I think one of the things that helps people heal and be able to get beyond addictions is the vulnerability. That's what happens in those meetings, right? You go to AA and you go, this is my name and I'm an addict. And people were there I struggled with this and I did, this. And I think that's probably maybe some of the most beautiful and pure community that maybe exists in our world, whether it's in a church or not in a church, are the people that are willing. And it's hard for all of us to do that. I think even in a church environment where we have small groups, we call them circles here, and people go to them, it takes a while to feel really like you can trust people to be vulnerable.
Can I? Okay.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to throw out something maybe practical, because I feel like we've had conversations around this lately. And I think vulnerability and authenticity can be buzzwords. That a lot of people are like, what does that mean? What does that look like? And I think the thought that hit me as you're talking is like, I think, if you just want to break it down practically, I think authenticity is you just walking into every room without a persona. I think it's when, I think the more of an integrated person you are, comfortable in your own skin with who you are, without a persona, the more there's, because I think some people think, okay, I need to be authentic, I need to be vulnerable, I need to confess all my most egregious stuff to everybody. And so I think authenticity is being without persona to everyone you meet. Vulnerability is being is disclosing in appropriate amounts in different settings.
Yes, it's good.
So when I speak on a Sunday,
hopefully people you trust.
Yes.
Yes.
Like when I speak on a Sunday, I try to be both authentic and vulnerable to a degree.
Yes.
So I want people to know that would be tempted to put me on a platform. Oh my gosh, I'm hacking through the same stuff you are. I'm very imperfect. Got a lot of weaknesses, but it would be inappropriate for me to disclose everything that I've ever struggled with or still struggle with. But I need to be appropriately vulnerable in that place, and then I need other people that I can be fully vulnerable with. I need a select, very small crew that I fully trust, that can be fully vulnerable.
But we can be authentic in every room, and everywhere. And I think that's a great distinction for people.
No, it's really helpful. One practical way, I mean, for me, that I try to be authentic, even on Sunday mornings. We mentioned tongue-in-cheek kind of Sunday morning interactions, but like on Sunday when you're talking to someone, or just not just Sunday, but whether you're in your workplace or at school or at home, wherever you are, like if someone asks you, how are you doing? Don't just give the tongue-in-cheek, everything's great, living the dream, I'm fine. Like, find a way. You don't have to overshare everything that's going on in your life, but be real with people. And you want to build connection. Just thinking to your quote on weakness, just if you're struggling, find a way, an appropriate way to share what you're struggling with, what you're going through. And I think fear, you mentioned shame, but I think fear is also a big part of this too. Fear of rejection, fear of what people are going to say. And I think that holds so many people back from just being willing to take the risk to share what's really going on, what's really happening. And I think if we were all willing to be a little bit more honest with others about where we're at, what we're going through, what we're experiencing, where we are, we would find that our connections would be stronger and would grow with people around us.
I agree. That's a good point, because I do think back to interactions you have with people. When you're going, how are you doing? Oh, I'm good. usually the conversation kind of just ends there.
Yeah,
like
it just stops.
or have you ever noticed it's really hard to connect with somebody when that is kind of the front? And we all do it. I'm not saying other people, but I do too. Versus, I kind of love the point what you said, which is like someone says, "How you doing?" "Oh, I'm good." They go, "Yeah, I woke up and I had a pain in my hip today. I realize I'm getting old." Which happened to me. I woke up that way.
But it just creates a
literally,
moment
if you
for a
just say that,
conversation.
someone's like, "Oh man, I'm sorry you're going with that." You know what? I've been struggling with plantar fasciitis for the last 3 weeks too, and man, it's all. I had that once too. It was terrible. You roll your foot on a, that's what I'm saying is conversations naturally happen when we are authentic.
Yep.
When we're not authentic,
that's
when I have found is probably the hardest to. You feel like it's all. You ever know? You're just a struggle to kind of like it's all superficial.
Well, I think especially in our roles, because it's a great point, and I've been trying to actually work on this lately because I don't know about y'all, but I feel like I am fully comfortable, especially if I'm meeting with people from the church, of them being vulnerable and being like, yes, please, you need to be vulnerable. You need to be able to have a safe space, and I want to be a safe space for you, and let me encourage you, let me pour into you. And then if they're ever like, how are you doing? I'm like, my gut level reaction is like, I don't want you. You don't need to bear my weight. I'm good. It's funny. There was an awkwardly long silence. Was it Sunday? Tommy and I, Jim, were just like walking on the treadmill and, talking about some stuff in his life. And then he's like, man, I haven't asked you in a while. Like, how are you really doing? And like, I almost was like, I'm good. But I literally like paused for a long time. Like, first off, I'm like, I don't know if I've even thought to process how I'm doing. Like, how am I doing?
Yeah.
And then like, I thought for a while and I was like, he goes, Russ, and I'm like, sorry. I literally told him, I said, I'm thinking of how to honestly answer that. And I just started thinking back through like the week, and then I'm like, how am I doing? And then I didn't want to and then I'm thinking like, how do I like?
And then I got so long and awkward that you weren't really sure what to say next.
This is actually hard for us because we're all Enneagram 3s and we don't like to process our emotions anyway. So it's all.
No, I also think one of the things that comes with being Enneagram 3 is your image. Image matters.
It does.
So you want to project. And I do think that there's what I think is right in our world today that I think is even I want to say in our church world, things that have shifted is I remember years ago we were just going through some really difficult internal struggles as a church, and there was a lot of change happening, a lot of things happening, which was really hard. And I remember really feeling the need that like, hey, we don't do them very often. It's like, hey, we need to have a church meeting, family meeting. You know what I mean? And I remember we had a family, and I think like 450 people showed up for it. So we're gonna have a family meeting. Talk about it. And I just remember talking to a guy who's probably about 20-some years older than me, been in ministry for a long time. And I was just like, yeah, we're going through all this stuff and whatever. And I just, and I was talking to him, just sharing some of the stuff we're walking through, some of the stuff emotionally that's the toll it's taken, this and that, what we're, wrestling with. And I forget, he was just like, well, he said, here's the thing, make sure you just like be strong for people when you're in front of them, but you can bleed privately. And I just remember like walking away from that going, yeah, but I don't think that's what people want.
No.
I think people are tired of having everybody just even think about this, and let's go outside the church world, political world, everything's sugar coated, everything is this, everything's that, and there's not a lot of real. And so I did the exact opposite. I got up and sat on a stool in front of everybody, probably cried 3 or 4 times through the whole thing, and just shared as much as I felt was appropriate. I was very vulnerable in that moment, within reason, or what I was able to share of a lot of the private situations that were going on with staff and this and that. And that really turned the tide for our church. That was like a healing night. It was just powerful. People came up, this, that. And
that was a powerful night.
And what's crazy is that I just think about the advice of, I want to say, the old guard. That was the model. That's why I said I think there are some things that we're getting better at in some regards in our culture today, maybe, that we're being we're able to be a little bit more vulnerable than we were. And hopefully, I've always been trying to be very authentic. Who I am is on the platform, same, but the vulnerability part has been a little bit of a journey. And I think some of that has been kind of what I grew up in was, you have it. And there's this bad mentality that we get in as pastors, right? People come to church so they can hear from us.
Mm-hmm.
People come to church so that we can help them. Through the Bible, we can help them. So you take on the Savior complex. And the next thing you know, you're just like, everything's got to be perfect, and I've got to be perfect, and I've got to communicate this stuff, and my life's got to look perfect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens with, I'm just want to say, with pastors, and sometimes they get lost in this world where they end up, I don't say with a persona, but they end up, they're never real. They're never vulnerable. People can't connect with them.
Yep.
Well, we're going to have to wrap up, but I was going to end with one question, and I feel like we're going to leave people wanting, but I think that's not a bad thing. Both of you spitball. Is there one way that you can build authenticity? You mentioned I love your definition, but is there any way that we can build authenticity? Putting you on the spot.
I just think another thing, like you mentioned this in passing, like being honest with yourself.
Yep.
So this may sound ethereal, but I just think the deepest way to build authenticity with others is to build authenticity with yourself.
It's a great start.
I think the more self-honesty there can be, I think the more sometimes this comes in allowing yourself a little bit more silence. For me as a person of faith, a little bit more time in the presence of God, letting the Word of God read through me, stabilizing, centering me. I think the more centered I am in myself and knowing who I am, the more I will not feel the need to be deferred to external pressure or whatever room I'm in.
Yeah,
it's good.
I think that's a great answer. I'll just add like a practical thing that's helped me with this. Believe it or not, was actually meeting with a counselor, because I totally agree with what you're saying about first being authentic with yourself, but for me, a lot of that journey was like getting in touch, like understanding myself. Yeah. And I don't think and sometimes we don't allow ourselves. That's one thing you'll do with a counselor, right? A lot of times they want to go back and revisit things. They want to go back and, what was your childhood like? What was it? All that stuff. That's what you do. But it's because it was experiences, especially in moments that happen in probably the most important developmental times of your life, that have led to personas. Not intentionally, but have led to you projecting something or casting something. So for me, there was a process of having to kind of go back, and it wasn't all like back to childhood because I had a good childhood, but I had to kind of go within, so to speak, and I had to kind of, and what's beautiful about a counselor is it feels like a really safe space for you to be very vulnerable. And I think maybe you have to have some environment where you can be vulnerable to discover who you really are.
Yep.
It's good. It's good.
Like they're connected,
My next counseling appointment is tomorrow.
I love the framework. You got to journey inward to go outward. Yeah. So good. So good.
Yeah.
Well, it's been good.
Yeah.
I'm loving this series. If you're listening to this, and I don't know what week this will come out, but go back and binge The Art of Connection. And until next time, share this with somebody you think it will encourage, and we will see you next week.
Hey guys, it's Russ. Thanks so much for listening. We really believe if we can get around tables instead of behind screens, if we can talk to each other instead of at each other, we can make the world better. To help us do that, here are a few things you can do to help. First, if you haven't yet, leave a review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe on YouTube. This helps more than you know. Also, if you have been impacted by the community out of which this podcast comes, that's X-Church. Maybe you're local or you've been touched by the messages and impact across the country, even the world. I want to encourage you to support this work. A powerful life principle is to invest in the people and places that invest in you. And so I want to invite you to do that right now by going to thex.church/give. You can give a one-time small gift, a sacrificial gift, or even become a recurring partner. Together, let's keep elevating the conversation, thinking higher, loving deeper, and making the world better. Cheers.